got the colors.
Wampus Camp.
Hey man, our list goes up. We can't take no more. We might get you next year on the waiting list.
Go wait while you can.
I am. Hey, well, hey, I wore my hat yesterday. I just asked my wife. I said, "Is this too soon?"
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We proceed each council meeting with a word of prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would like, please feel free to join us. Miss Isby, can I get you a word of prayer, please?
Sure. If you'll join with me. Our most gracious and heavenly Father, we thank you for the abundant blessings that you've given us. Lord, we thank you for the city you've graciously blessed us with. And we just ask, Lord, that everything that we do tonight will be in your name and your glory, and at the end of it, that you get the honor that you're so deserving of. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you would, please remain standing. I invited this lady, Dr. Terry Cox, who I heard sing at the dedication of a disabled veterans home on Tyler Street, and it was so beautiful. I asked her to come sing our national anthem for us tonight. Dr. Cox.
Thank you so much, Mayor Castleberry. We're going to face the light. Feel free to sing with me. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Play ball. Thank you, Dr. Cox. And I'm going to go ahead and speak for Frank Shaw. Frank, I could see it in his eyes, was disturbed because he couldn't stand up. He just had surgery. So, Frank, I know you're standing with us.
I would stand if I could.
You need to be here 2 weeks from now because Grimes and Ledbetter are going to sing the national.
Yeah. So does that mean he's not gonna talk tonight?
No, don't mean that.
Mr. Mayor, I hate to bring this up, but one night before a Conway High School football game, it was raining and the band was not able to come out onto the field for pregame ceremonies, and I had to sing the national anthem by myself, and it sounded just exactly like that. Whether you were there or not, that's how it sounded to me.
Dr. Cox, you made me proud to be an American. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, would you call the roll, please, sir?
Mr. Hawkins?
Here.
Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Here.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Isby?
Here.
You should have received copies of the minutes from the August 8th, 2023 meeting. Any changes, corrections?
Make a motion for approval as submitted. Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
before we get into the agenda, could Councilman Tucker and I would like to announce our Ward 2 meeting,
Sure.
since everybody's here and watch at the beginning of the meeting, not always to the very end, on October 2nd at 6 o'clock here in the council chambers. And we'll post it and send out emails to people, but we encourage anybody who lives in Ward 2, which is the northeast side of town, to come join us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
ladies. First up tonight, we have Economic Development Committee, and we have a resolution to approve the grant application submission to the Economic Development Administration for off-site water improvements to develop the South Conway Industrial Site in partnership with Conway Corporation. We have Mr. Greg Dale here tonight. Greg, you would come up in case the council has any questions. Oh, Brett, you'll do.
Brett will do it. Lucky you.
Yes, indeed. Brett McDaniel, Conway Corporation. Thank you for the opportunity to be first on a very long agenda. Okay, and great way to open the council meeting.
Thank you.
So this resolution simply allows the city and Conway Corporation to work together on applying for grant money for some of the water improvements required for West Rock Coffee facility at the old Kimberly Clark building. It also authorizes the mayor to sign off on any contracts or documentation for that application. Any questions?
None.
I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Resolution R2343. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0.
Brett, you
Thank
did
you.
good.
Thank you, Brett. Next up, we have a resolution to approve the issuance of bonds to assist in financing the acquisition, construction, and equipping of an industrial facility for West Rock Beverage Company, Limited Liability Corporation. Mr. Gordon Wilborn is here if you have any questions about this. Hey, Gordon.
Thank you. You may remember back in 21, I think it was, you scrambled at the end of the year, had a special meeting, December 28th or something, to get this done for West Rock. And now it turned out they're building much more than they thought they were going to build at the time. This project has really expanded. So I think I have the order correct. The first resolution is just to increase the amount of that bond issue from 160 million to 300 million. That's the production facility. And then just while we're talking about the second resolution is the distribution facility, which is a new project I didn't know they were going to do at that point for 75 million. And these are just resolutions of intent. We would be back with an ordinance at a later date.
Thank you, Mr. Wilborn.
To be clear, remind me, these are not bonds that the city's on the hook to repay, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
A subsidiary of West Rock would own the bonds, and it's just for purposes of property tax abatement.
Move for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
R2344. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. And I think Mr. Wilborn's already spoken to this. Sorry. Next is a resolution expressing the intent of the city of Conway for the issuance of bonds to assist in financing and refinancing of acquisitions, renovation, rehabilitation, and equipping of the industrial facility for West Rock Coffee Beverage.
Make a motion for the adoption of this resolution, R2345.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Any further comment? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you.
0. Thank you. Mr. Hawkins, your long night begins.
Yes, sir, it does. First thing we've got to do is consideration to approve waiving all three readings for the ordinances on this agenda this evening. And yes, we'll take a motion for that.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
This will be, Mr. Mayor, items 3, 4, 5, 6, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, and the Public Safety Committee items number 1 and 2.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item on the agenda, Mr. Mayor, is, let's see, we've got some people that are owing the city, that do owe the city money, and we are asking for the Faulkner County Tax Collector to place a certified lien against properties as a result of those incurred expenses by the city. The first location this evening, we have 3. First location is at 26 Briarwood Circle. The city has incurred $147.89 in work to clean up that property. Is there an owner or representative of an owner from 26 Briarwood Circle in the audience with us tonight? Mayor, I don't see anyone, so we have a resolution to read for this item. It's Resolution R
46.
46.
Make a motion for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution, place a lien on property at 26 Briarwood Circle. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0.
Our next location, Mr. Mayor, is at 602 Fifth Street. Again, $147.89 has been spent by the city to bring this one into code. And is there an owner or representative of an owner of 602 Fifth Street? Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone moving forward, so we have a resolution to be read for this item. It's Resolution R 2347.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this resolution for place lien on property at 602 Fifth Street in the amount of $147.89. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a property at 2620 Donaghy Avenue. 2620 Donaghy. We have spent $218.06 bringing this into code. Is there a representative of 2620 Donaghy Avenue with us tonight? Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone moving forward, so we have a resolution to be read for this item. It's R 2348.
Make a motion for the adoption of the resolution.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution, place a lien on the property at 2620 Donaghy Avenue. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance approving private club permit for Impact Golf Incorporated, allowing application of required permits from the Alcoholic Beverage Control Division. And we have an ordinance to read for this item. First of all, this property is located at 5150 John W. Allison Road, Suite B. We have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance 02360.
Anyone like to speak to this from the owners or anyone else? Okay, council, back to you.
I think we're good.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Ms. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Ms. Isby,
Yes.
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating insurance proceeds received from Progressive Insurance Company for the Conway Airport. Looks like somebody decided they wanted some of our fence to the tune of $10,682. Single vehicle accident. Jake, what you got for us on
It
that?
wasn't me, first of all.
And that's a positive.
Yeah. No, we just had an accident. Someone ran into our gate. It was about $10,000 damage. So we had to get it replaced. We had to be secure. So we went ahead and got it fixed, got it replaced. We got the insurance check back. So we're just putting it back in that.
Good. It's an accounting ordinance is all this one is.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance 02361.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Done a great job out there, by the way, Jake. Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Ms. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Isby,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins.
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Jake. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating funds from the Arkansas Community Foundation to the city of Conway. And we have a $3,000 appropriation. This appears to be also an accounting situation. And we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance 02362.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion?
This obviously is a great deal. Do we have room out there to store these? Is that what we'll do?
So this is a grant we received from the Arkansas Community Foundation, and we will store the cots at Don Owens in McGee. And so we'll split them up and we'll do some bedding supplies as well, but we have the space. And thank you, Shelley, for helping us with that.
Mm-hmm.
Garrett.
Ms. Isby,
Yes.
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter.
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance amending the recommendations for the operations of boards and commissions. And we have an ordinance to read for this. It's ordinance 02363. And I'll take a motion for that, and then we'll let Chris talk.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. We'll let Mr.
Mr. Paxton.
Thank you, Mayor. The City of Conway has 15 boards, committees, and commissions. Each of these boards, committees, and commissions were formed using various processes such as ordinance, resolutions, and simple votes. Each of these boards currently addresses certain considerations such as FOIA, public meetings, and other such issues differently. However, these considerations have changes due to changes in state laws over the years. The goal of the mayor's office for this item was to take the existing ordinances and resolutions for various boards, committees, and commissions and combine items such as state and federal requirements, best practices, and varying processes, and to simplify those into one central ordinance that would allow all boards, committees, and commissions to share similar minimal standards.
Any questions for Mr. Paxton?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
One quick question here. So, I've been reading through this. Anywhere in here, does it lay out which department and/or staff person is responsible for each of the boards and commissions? Meaning being that primary point of contact.
Yes, the city staff responsibilities is a portion of the Article 1 that's included, and that does specify that each board, committee, and commission would be assigned an appointed staff member.
Thank you, Ms. Mill. Any further questions? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Ms. Isby,
Yes.
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Ms. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Aye.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Chris. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an impact fee agreement for Centerstone Lot 8 and Moix Meadows Lot Number 8 as well. And we have a resolution for this item. It's Resolution R2349. And Chris, would you like to address this for us?
I would, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. The impact fee credit agreement for Centerstone Lot 8 and Moix Meadows Lot 8 was brought to the City Council for the first reading at the August City Council meeting. The item is currently on the agenda for a final approval of the impact fee credit agreement. A developer is entitled to impact fee credits when park improvements are made to the city. The developer is requesting a credit totaling $75,000, the appraised value of the dedicated land.
Make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second?
Have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an impact fee agreement for Land's End subdivision, phase number 2. And Mr. Paxton, you're still with us.
Thank you. The impact fee credit agreement and improvements made to Land's End Subdivision Phase 2 were brought to the City Council for a first reading at the August City Council meeting. The item is currently on the agenda for final approval of the impact fee credit agreement. A developer is entitled to impact fee credits for road impact fees when improvements are made to the city's major roadway system. The street work on Tyler Street is a major roadway system improvement, and based on the submitted documentation, the developer is requesting a credit totaling $210,038.81 for Phase 2.
Questions?
Make a motion for the adoption of the resolution. I have it as R2350.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to approve a conditional use permit for a Brahms location with a drive-through property located at 2505 and 2515 Prince Street and 963 Ferris Road. And Chris, you're still standing there. I thinking you're wanting to talk about this.
Yes, sir.
You like Brahms, or you just wanting to talk about this?
I'm excited about this project. So.
Me too. I'm excited about it.
So we have a conditional use request to allow an eating place with drive-through services and food store in an O1 zoning district for property located at 2505 and 2515 Prince Street and 963 Ferris Road. As conditioned, the negative impact to adjacent properties will be mitigated through the use of screening and landscaping, and the site will be subject to the commercial development standards in accordance with Article 10 of the zoning code. Staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit with the provided 13 conditions of approval. Among those 13 conditions includes operating hours are limited to 5 a.m. to 12 a.m. That would be condition 1. It's not limited to these conditions. So condition number 4 is the development of the site is still subject to the site development review in accordance to Article 10. A portion of item 5 states that the Director of Planning and Development may require additional screening along adjacent residential areas to reduce the impact of the proposed use. And item 11 states that a conditional use permit shall expire if the use ceases for a consecutive period of greater than 18 months to accommodate Brahms' identified construction schedule. I have also requested that the Director of Planning and Development shall be authorized herein to grant an extension of no more than 90 days beyond said 18 months period to accommodate the applicant's identified construction and engineering timeline if necessary.
Make a motion for the conditional use permit with the 13 conditions.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this conditional use permit for Brahms Ice Cream. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Well, hold on.
Yes, sir.
Any further public comment?
I'm sorry, I thought I did that. Any further comment from anyone in the crowd?
We do have representatives from Brahms present if they wanted to come forward as well.
Would y'all like to hear from them, Council?
Your request.
If they want to, I mean.
Frank looks like he wants to get
I do,
up.
I do have a question. Well, I'll let him talk first.
Yeah, I don't have much to say, it's just a little bit here.
See what I was trying to do, David?
I know y'all tried to skip my part, didn't you? Frank Shaw, 1315 Main Street, Conway, Arkansas for Brahms, and this is Cody Foran from Oklahoma City, and Helen Passion from Arlington. They've come in just for the meeting tonight, so I want to introduce you to them. They're going to be good neighbors and good partners in our city. So we're here just to say we're for it. This is a great place for ice cream. I'll limit it to that. They shall have questions. Thank you, Theo.
Did you hear that, Theo? You limited to that.
That's the best I could do.
Would anyone else like to speak for or against this proposal, this resolution? Okay, council, back to you.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
Well, actually for Chris.
Cody? Chris?
Wait.
Paxton?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is excellent, but I do have one concern about northbound traffic on Ferris turning left. We have room to put a turn lane or anything that would help alleviate some of that?
Councilmember, we do still have this going through the site development review at this time. That's something I can bring up with the city engineer through that process. We have several items that we're still looking at. It has not been approved for site development review at this time, but I can definitely bring that up to the staff.
That on the radar.
Sure.
And may I ask a question? When are we up on planning commission, Chris? Is it the 18th to come back for site development review?
The site development review has an exception. The exception will be contingent on the appeal of the exception approval from the planning director. So at this time, it's not scheduled, and we're still waiting on the appeal process.
Okay, so we'll be back in some capacity in front of the planning commission, maybe the council. But for now, we've taken a really necessary step. We're really pleased to be here, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, council? Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins?
Mr. Mayor, we whipped through that first 9 in a hurry.
Really? Doing good.
You did a good job.
I'm telling you.
I did not schedule it like this. I just get a copy of the agenda myself.
I would like to ask for y'all to develop a toad suck type of ice cream. A green one?
I was fixing to say, it's gotta be green.
A green one?
Ooh, that would be.
If you can call it, I think it ought to be called toad suck and, yeah, we'll be good. I'm sorry, I'm just playing with you, sorry. Next item is consideration to approve a conditional use permit for Conway Ministry Center to allow for a shelter for the homeless on property located at 134 Harkrider Street. And Chris, why don't you tell us about this?
Sure, this is a conditional use request for, to allow a shelter for the homeless in a C3 zoning district for property located at 134 Harkrider Street. Conway Ministry Center has requested to allow the shelter for the homeless in the C3 zoning district for property located at that address. The center will operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, due to care that is needed by some residents. The Case Management Administration Office will be open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. Staff recommends approval of the conditional use permits, but provides with the provided 13 conditions of approval.
Make a motion to approve. the request.
Have a motion and a second to approve this conditional use permit. Any further discussion? I'm sorry, just a minute, please. Spring, would you like to speak to this? I didn't see you back there, I'm sorry. Could you state your name for the record, please?
Spring Hunter, 225 East Robbins Street here in Conway. Really, I don't have a whole lot to add other than we really appreciate the City Council's consideration of our conditional use permit. We are thrilled to pieces to offer a family shelter option and to be able to house people with disabilities and people that may be sick and checking out of hospitals. And this is something that our city needs as far as we move forward to sheltering all of our homeless population. And we think it's a great location for that, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter, and thank you for the job y'all do.
Y'all don't have any questions for me?
Council, you have any
'Cause I came
questions for Ms. Hunter?
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Garrett?
All in favor?
I'm sorry.
There was some opposition to the plan commission. Is anybody else here to speak?
Oh, Mr. Hawkins, I guess you and I need to get our game together on which one of us is going to call for other comments. I'm going to turn that over to you. Mr. Grimes, what?
Okay, well, I know that someone spoke against it at the plan commission meeting, but perhaps.
Would anyone like to speak on the other side of this that opposes it? I'm sorry, Mr. Grimes.
That's fine. No, that's fine. Well, I have one request to change one word on the conditions, if you will allow. Number 4, it says fencing with coded entry is required. I don't want the city to require a fence around a homeless shelter. I would like to change that word to allow. If they think they need it, I would like to allow them, but I don't want the city to request that be done. If you're agreeable to that.
So has there been a motion and second on this yet?
There is.
Okay, so this, Mr. Grimes' motion would be a motion to amend. The present motion, that would need to be voted on first before the council would consider the main motion.
That's the question.
Yes, sir.
Is it necessary to have the barbed wire and razor wire? Are they?
Well,
It's
that would
prohibited.
remain. That would remain that's
That's
prohibited.
prohibited.
That's prohibited.
I second Mr. Grimes' recommended change.
Okay, we have a motion. I need a motion and a second to amend his, correct?
You've got a motion and second now, so now the council can vote on Mr. Grimes' motion to amend the main motion.
And then we'll vote on them.
All right, those in favor of voting for Mr. Grimes' amendment, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now we're back, Mr. Grimes. We have a second, motion and a second on the original, but it's been amended to allow a fence should they so desire. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Garrett,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Mr. Mayor, the next item is consideration to approve a major modification to the Sherman Heights PUD to allow a child care facility at 575 Club Lane here in Conway. This is an item that we looked at, 15 years ago, maybe?
2013.
Yeah, 10 years ago. Golly, 10 years ago. Mr. Paxton, I'm going to shut up. Your turn.
Thank you. This is an objection to the approval of a major PUD modification, Sherman Heights PUD Lot 7D, 575 Club Lane. Let me see. I apologize. The applicant has requested a PUD amendment to allow a nursery in conjunction with a preschool. The applicant states that a nursery falls within the child care facility definition of the ordinance and is no longer allowed by right in the underlying O2 zoning due to the 2014 ordinance change. There are two routes to allow the use. Through the PUD modification, the child care use could be approved and be allowed by right. PUD language supersedes underlying ordinance requirements. Alternatively, through a conditional use permit, the applicant could have requested the use to the Planning Commission, which would have been forwarded to the City Council for consideration. Either route would be similar in application because either the PUD or the CUP is subject to conditions of approval. However, since an existing PUD is in place, it was determined that a PUD amendment would be the appropriate route to take since it would amend existing conditions rather than creating additional documentation. The director had approved the request subject to any objections from the City Council without knowledge of previous discussions by the City Council and the public in 2013. The mayor, an ex officio member of the City Council by virtue of his executive position, objected to the approval and sponsored the item to return to the City Council. The playground at this location has already been built and is a requirement for a school to operate in Arkansas. The playground was originally built as a state-mandated play area for Pediatrics Plus and was a part of a challenge to the PUD in 2013. Per a unanimous vote of the City Council in August of 2013, the City Council determined that the PUD was not developed inappropriately. However, there were likely considerations that the City Council would have made, but then Mayor Townsell denied those considerations to be made because at the time, those were not on the agenda to be discussed. At the time, Planning and Development Director Brian Patrick recommended to the owner to relocate the playground or to build an 8-foot tall privacy fence, but did not have a method to make the request a requirement. I'll take any questions.
And then fast forward to 2018. If you remember, when the Montessori school moved in, some of the neighborhood was somewhat put out specifically with me because I had not caught that. And I think we all agreed at that time that should it change ownership again, that it would be brought back before the council. And that's why I pulled it, because I was there in 2018 and I remember the fallout it caused. That being said, is there anyone here who'd like to speak against this? Yes, ma'am. And we'll finish up with those speaking for it.
My name is Shauna Holder, and I've lived at 620 Whispering Wind Circle for 19 and a half years, and I vehemently oppose a child care facility being allowed to go into 575 Club Lane. In 2005, when my husband and I were considering purchasing this home, there were no homes, no buildings behind us in the Sherman Heights PUD. Our nearest neighbor was the McDonald's on Salem, and my husband at that time was a realtor, and he did a thorough research on the PUD, making sure that we would be peaceful and secure in our home. My late husband was convinced that we were protected from such things as child care facilities. A few of the restrictions that he placed confidence in, which have been violated, our buildings could only be 1 story. The building behind us is used as a 2-story building. Occupants of that building must observe quiet office hours. A daycare facility does not keep office hours. And the space between the Sherman Heights PUD's building and the Windcrest subdivision brick wall would be a green space, as you said, which is now not being used as a green space. My late husband and I chose to purchase this home specifically, not only as a quiet and secure place to raise our family, but also as an investment. Both of these intents will be infringed upon if Sherman Heights PUD is allowed to further violate their original restrictions agreement. Besides losing daily peace due to noise and the hours of a child care facility, the residents of Windcrest, all of Windcrest, will be losing financially as the value of our homes will go down. Ask yourself honestly, do you want a child care facility behind your home? I love children. I have 5 of my own and I have 7 grandchildren, and my mother had a daycare. I think the children are our future, but I want peace in my home. And it is not a quiet endeavor, a child care facility. It is part of your job to protect the Conway citizens. And this decision affects some of us greatly. This home is part of the security that my late husband left for me and for our children. Your decision in this matter affects our future and the future of Windcrest subdivision residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holder.
Mayor, Chris Ryan, 630 Whispering Wind, and we still love you. I just want you to know that, even though we were mad at you at the time.
Y'all were mad.
It's okay, I promise. That's why we're here today, and I appreciate the opportunity for us to have this discussion. I don't know that it needs more discussion, to be honest with you. We all know what the issue is, and it's a major noise issue that hopefully we can resolve in some way through this. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here and appreciate you guys taking it up again.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else like to speak against? Anyone like to speak for?
My name is Brent Salter. I was expecting typically the speak fors or the opportunities to speak on behalf go first. So what I was kind of waving my hand about was I spoke with Mr. Finkenbinder beforehand, and I spoke with Mr. Paxson beforehand, and there seems to be some more items that need clarity before we would want this to come before a vote of the city council. So there's been some questions that have been asked. Our understanding and takeaways from meeting with planning department and what the end result could be from bringing forth a PUD amendment. There's still some questions. And, so we would ask, and I'm not sure what the formal term is, whether it's you bring it back in chambers or we table it. Yeah. So that's what we would ask today, is just table it until we can get some more clarity to some of the questions that we have about potential outcomes of bringing this forth to the council.
We can put this back on the agenda in 2 weeks. We're back to our 2-week schedule, Brent, so it won't be a long process.
So that would be our request.
So table it is the proper thing to do.
Correct, if there's a motion in a second.
Make a motion that we table it.
Have a motion and a second that we table this for the time being. Any
And if
further?
it's not ready in 2 weeks, then it can be.
Yeah.
Whatever. 2 weeks will be our next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, your time's on your side.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Before Chris sits down, I know he's gonna be
Still
up
got
here
a
for a
ways.
while yet. I get it. This situation to me seems like it's procedurally flawed. Because what I think is that there is a PUD in effect now. Why are we having to look at the whole thing?
Sure.
Can you explain that to me?
Anytime you ask for an amendment of a PUD, you're effectively making changes to the current zoning. It's PUD is the zoning, however, those conditions of approval are attached to that zoning. So when you're making changes from one zoning to another zoning, even though it's from PUD to PUD, it still opens it up to have allowances for other considerations. They're making an amendment. There can be a counter from the city council or from the body that's hearing that item to make an amendment to require additional considerations of approval or amendments to those considerations or conditions of approval. So, for example, if there was a condition of approval that the council had requested to try to reduce the sound between the two locations, there could be a condition of approval. We will grant this with the condition of approval that you take the following advice or the following requirements to try to mitigate that sound requirement. Whenever you reopen discussion of the PUD, that also opens up for additional potential conditions of approval, which is why the applicant has requested a table to see what those ramifications could potentially be.
So there's no way then to vote just on what they're wanting to add to the PUD, up or down vote on that, without having to look at the entire project again? Am I understanding that right?
I believe that's correct, unless that's what the council chose to do. Any of the council members could make, it would be required for any of the individual council members to make a request to amend what's on the table. Once that gets amended, it's just like the first time you've heard it. So you can make changes to the existing PUD or make additional conditions of approval. And I would deflect to, I believe that that's the process. This is not, the amendment of a PUD is not something that comes up regularly.
So I was going to say, this is a first.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
So let me, I can do, before you do lawyer speak, let me see if I can do it in my non-lawyer speak.
Please.
Basically, what you're saying is by doing one little thing, it opens up the entire PUD where we could say, in theory, oh, in this other section, you need to do this, and this section, you got to do this. We could make all kinds of changes, not just this one.
That's correct, but there are limitations to that. So for example, the playground has already been constructed. If there was a condition of approval, I believe, for example, if you did a condition of approval that you have to remove that playground, that's not something that you would be able to do, because at that point, the removal of the playground would be subject to redevelopment. You would be it would become a legal nonconformance. At the time of redevelopment, not the change of ownership, but at the time of redevelopment of that lot, then that's when the playground would have to be removed. It wouldn't be removed at the time that the city council decided that it would be removed, because it was in conformance whenever it was built.
So, and I'm trying to understand what you're talking about, Andy. I think I do, is that what was coming before the council tonight was be allowed to keep infants. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Hawkins, just that one thing?
And I'm just wondering why that's not a standalone issue. And because if you, again, this is the first time in my 30-something years I've seen this. Anybody else on here? First time we've seen it.
No.
So it kind of is scary that we have other PUDs that are out there, and if somebody wants to change one thing, the council at that time could come in and say, we don't like any of this.
And I think that's
we
where
want to redevelop, and that's not right.
I think that's where back in 2013, when Mayor Townsend had stated at that time, that stuff is not on the table, because that opens a Pandora's box potentially if those items were on the table, plus it wasn't on his existing agenda. But at this time, since they open the box and say, yes, we would like to amend the conditions of approval within our PUD, it exposes them to potentially changing based off of what would the impact be of this change. The impact of this change could potentially be additional children at that location, so a condition of approval might be to mitigate that additional noise. I mean, I'm not saying that it would be or wouldn't be, that's just a possibility.
Do you know how many students are allowed at that facility now?
I do not.
Okay.
You know,
Does anybody know how many? 75?
Are we talking about 75 period, or are we talking about infants in all 75?
They're not licensed for infants, so they're licensed for 12 months to pre-K. So if you qualify for kindergarten and below, so 12 months to 5 years of age.
That's what the 75 would be?
A range of those ages.
Okay, one other question. How many infants are we talking about having?
So
About, you don't have to give me exact.
Yeah, it would depend on your age. So your ratio is 1 to 5. So 1 teacher per 5 infants. And so it depends on the square footage that we're allowed to per DHS coming in and authorizing. So they would come in and measure the facility.
excuse me, Ms. Glover, would you step up to the mic? I think someone texted us and said that we couldn't hear you. That's okay. I should have asked you to come up. My bad.
No, that's totally fine. So I'm Lacey Glover. My background is in education. I have a degree in early childhood education. And for the past 8 years, I've been the preschool director at the preschool at Second Baptist. And my husband and I are potentially looking at opening a facility at 575 Club Lane. And I totally understand where she's coming from.
I think from the perspective that I'm in is, yes, you do have to have a playground if you're a licensed DHS facility. Now, in the world of DHS, there is no difference between a daycare and a preschool. You're a licensed facility. Okay, so that is across the board. What we are simply wanting to do is expand the ages of care that we would offer. So right now with Montessori, they do not offer care to babies. And so we are wanting to expand the care to offer to, the youngest age would be 6 weeks, which is not common, but the youngest you could offer is 6 weeks to pre-K age. So if they qualify for kindergarten, they would go to kindergarten. So again, the number that you can have within your facility is based on the square footage that DHS would come in and measure and say that you were qualified to have. And then it ranges based on the square footage for how many kids you're going to have in that specific classroom. And then that also takes into consideration the number of teachers you're going to have in that classroom. So speaking, what I feel like is the hot button issue is for playgrounds. You have to have 75 square feet per child that you have on a playground. So for example, what we are proposing is a small preschool. We are not looking at being a large establishment. That is something that we pride ourselves as having a very small family-like atmospheres with small classes, with small student-teacher ratios. So the max students that we would have on the playground at any given time is 15 kids. So I understand it's a lot of noise. I too have children, and I know they can be rowdy. But we're talking about what we're coming to you tonight is asking to expand the age ranges that we can offer, and those would be babies. Babies would provide 0 additional noise on a playground, none whatsoever. We do, by law, have to take babies outside. That is part of your DHS handbook, is you do have to expose them to the outside air, but that is done in buggies and strollers. So they would not be creating any additional noise to the playground that is already there right now. We also want to do improvements to the playground. So I totally understand a 2-story structure that's there on the playground. We want to put everything down at ground level. So we're not looking at creating, different things outside, play structures that would create additional noise. We're looking at kind of bringing things even down a notch. So I understand what the concerns are, and we are more than happy in working with the neighbors to create something that's mutually beneficial for both us and them, that's cost effective for us. We don't want to break the bank and put in a whole new $50,000 playground, but we are very open to doing something that's mutually beneficial for us and for them.
Just for clarity, you're not planning on expanding making a huge playground?
Absolutely not.
Kind of leave it like it is basically and just upgrade some of the stuff in there, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me how many students Conway Montessori had?
No. I think originally when they went in the space, they were filling the space, but I think they are down to a single classroom currently.
I guess my question would be, if we're just, and I'm kind of like Andy, if we approved it and it was a PUD and the only difference that I'm seeing is bringing in infants who, in my mind, I mean, they would cry, but I can't see that cry affecting neighbors, as versus a situation where you had older children who were already outside, it's already approved. I mean, I'm sympathetic to the neighbors as well, but I guess I don't see where that's going to change anything from what was already there.
If I could ask Chris a question for clarification, just for a second, if you don't mind.
Is Chris back?
Sorry, yes. The agenda item says consideration to approve a major modification to Sherman Heights PUD. What exactly is the major modification that's being asked for?
The major modification was an additional use. So it was as of right now, they were allowed to have a school. The addition was the daycare facility and childcare facility.
Right. All right. That in itself isn't enough. But the issue we all know, the issue is the playground.
Right.
Now, currently, a playground is not allowed. Is that correct?
The playground was reviewed in 2013, and it was voted unanimously to be in compliance with the PUD.
But didn't we change the O2 zoning to not allow daycares in the O2, even in the PUD?
When it was, you can't change a code, it becomes a legal non-conforming status. whenever you have an item that's already built and you create an ordinance that would make that illegal to be built in the future, then that becomes a legal non-conforming structure or a legal non-conformance.
So when we changed the ordinance to not allow daycares in '02, it had no effect on this.
It did have an effect on this, whereas previously it would have been allowed by right. If that's the two different routes that they would have had, was to either change the PUD or to go through a conditional use permit. If they had gone through a conditional use permit requirement, which is what it would currently require if they just had traditional zoning instead of a PUD, then there could be conditions of approval that route. But it's the same either direction you go.
Let me ask it this way. If the Montessori school moves out, vacant, if these people decide to move in and forget the infants, they're going to go with it as without infants, can they use the playground?
They should be able to use the playground. Think of it like a gas station. If you get a conditional use permit to build a gas station, it runs with that property until there's a redevelopment of that property, then that specific structure can be used.
So then the playground's off the table. Chris told me that the sound comes down his chimney and hits his living room. That's horrible. Honestly, that's horrible. I can't imagine having to live like that. He works from home and he works and he hears it all day long.
I didn't hear what he was saying.
The sound from the playground comes down his chimney and into his living room.
Can I also speak to our hours? So, because I know that she also spoke to the hours that it was affecting them. So the hours that we will be open is 8:30 to 2:30. So those are our school hours. And the time that we are outside by law, we have to offer outside play to all of our students for 30 minutes at least during the day. So the times that we go outside, I mean, they're outside, that's 2 hours, considering that we're going to take 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and pre-Ks outside. So it's 2 hours of the morning that they're going to go outside. So it's not an extensive portion of the day, and I understand that 2 hours in the day, if it's loud noises, is affecting their day, and I'm not taking that for granted. I understand that it is an inconvenience, but I am saying that it is not a substantial portion of the day. And yes, if you say that we are not allowed to make this amendment, then yes, we do still plan to hopefully open the preschool. We just will not be allowed to take babies. We'll start at 12 months, and we will have to fill the space, and we'll fill it with older students who will be on the playground, who will create more noise than babies.
All right, it makes sense now. Basically, by opening the PUD amendment to allow infants, it could open the door for the council, if so chooses, to disallow the playground.
If any more questions for me?
Thank you, Ms. Glover.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Chris, you want to say something?
Yes, Mayor, I just wanted to clarify, if you added a condition of approval to disallow the playground, then the playground would simply change to a legal non-conforming status. So until that playground is redeveloped, until there's, for example, a building permit requirement, then there's no mechanism that the city council would have to require the playground to be disassembled.
You call this a legal conforming. I used to call it a pre-existing non-conforming. Same
Those
thing?
are synonymous.
Same thing?
So in other words, even if the council wanted to do away with the playground, you're saying there's no way to do that?
There's no way in my opinion, you can double check that with the city attorney, that as long as it remains in its current status, then it can't be removed by action of the city council.
Because presently they're legally allowed to do that. It would be like coming in and rezoning residential property of a homeowner to only commercial.
Okay.
You'd make it illegal for them to
Okay,
use
well,
property that legally
then we
they
can
could
vote
use
tonight
before.
to approve what they're wanting.
Who made the motion to table?
I mean,
Okay, whoever made that motion, they could rescind it. Is that correct?
Did any council member make a motion?
Yeah, there was a motion in a second, but I think we need to do whatever the applicant's asking.
we can wait, but it's not gonna make any difference.
It's not gonna make any difference, because if they don't take the
Well,
infants,
he
they're
said
still
that-
gonna be able to.
He said that they wanted to clarify some stuff. Okay.
Okay. Step on up, Mr.
This
Sullivan.
was it? This is what you
I
wanted to
think we just
clarify?
clarified it.
Hopefully they're gonna still be able to do it.
We can't go in and take playground out.
No.
So, just a second, Brent. So if I understand you right, we're back to where we started on this, on them accepting infants. Is that correct?
I think we need to have withdrawal of a motion and a withdrawal of a second, wherever those came from.
Or vote no to tabling it.
Yeah, yeah.
Look, can I ask
We're
a
not
question?
taking a vote on that yet.
Can I ask a question to the applicant? Would you rather have some time, you want us, or what do you want to do? You think you can work out something with them? It was your suggestion, that's the reason I'm asking.
Correct. It was my suggestion because of this conversation
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was taking place. I will give you our word that we will meet with you and we will see if there's anything that we can do. As far as sound barriers, I understand, but based on this conversation, I think we're comfortable for it to be taken back in and taken to vote.
And y'all help me catch up. Did we,
So scrap
so
the-
we took a motion and a second to table it, but
So
we
should
did not
probably
vote on it. Vote and then be a best.
Because there's been a second, it'd be better to have a vote. That's the motion before the council.
Okay.
Vote is to table it, so a no vote would be to go ahead.
Need to
act
go
on it
ahead and
tonight.
act on it
Okay.
tonight, yes.
That would bring back the main.
Yes.
I would like to say one thing. These folks have been misuse of property there for a lot of years and have listened to the playground. So I would really, Gene and Brent, I would hope that y'all would work with them and see if we could come to some kind of resolution. It would work for both of them. We would be happy to try to accommodate anything that's possible to it. And to me, the one big issue here was that.
Come up here so they can hear you at home.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ann.
All right, I'm Gene Salter, and I am the owner of the property. And the one thing of clarity here is that we weren't asking for more children. We were just asking, like Ms. Glover said, is to reduce the age of allowed there in it. But the quantity, the number of students or participants is staying the same. It's just we're going to have, like she said, you know, if you've got 10 infants, you've got 10 less older children who are out making a lot of noise. So that was our only thing, is we were trying to accommodate the age realm in which she could accommodate. So that was what the request was. But then as we have come to learn, there's a lot of issues in trying to attempt it in that manner of trying to get a modification to it. But no, if, you know, at any time I have loved to visit with them, and if there's anything that we can do other than, you know, like she said, break the bank earlier, we'll do whatever we can to try to accommodate the neighbors. And the Glovers, she does run a very upscale facility in the preschool atmosphere, and that's what it is. This thing was, they could have, I was involved in the original development. Mr. Ott had it set up that way so that a school, because at the time we were doing that development, he was in conversation with public schools. So it could have had an elementary school there, now in place of what we wound up developing. So that was why the original PUD was set, and the O2, which would allow a school. And all of ours have been state certified preschools. So they've never been a daycare as such, because we had to be certified as a school. And that's what she is doing at this point. So I'm open to it. All we were trying to do is get the age realm changed and not go through all this PUD. When it came back, I didn't understand myself a modification of it. A lot of things have come to light in what a modification would do to the PUD, because if you wanted to change the signage inside a PUD, you could do that tonight. Or you could do that when someone does ask for modification, which would go to an extreme, but that possible allowance is there. But all we're trying to do is get it to where she can do that. I want nothing else changed on it. Continue the way it's been in operation for 12 years now, and keep it under that sentiment. Thank you.
And again, this was brought back up tonight because when we met with these folks in 2018, we said if this ever came up again, we would talk about it.
Well, and I apologize too, because I really thought when we changed the zone, O2 zoning, not allow daycares, it took care of this problem, but evidently It did not. So now
I
we
think,
know.
I think that was my understanding as well. So, okay. Okay, council says back, Chris, do you have anything else?
We have a motion on the floor.
We do. We have a motion and a second to table this. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
All in favor of tabling item 11, signify by saying aye. All opposed?
No.
No.
It fails 7-0. So the initial request is back up to the council.
So I'll make a motion to approve the modification of the PUD as requested.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this modification to the PUD. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0. Thank you, you guys, all of you for coming out tonight. Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to rezone property at 931 Faulkner Street from O3 to C1. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their meeting on August 21st of this year. And at that time, the commission voted 7-3 to forward this to City Council with a recommendation of approval. And we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance 02364.
Mr. Paxson?
Thank you, Mayor. Brent Salter has requested to rezone property located at this address from O3 to C1. The applicant is seeking the rezoning from O3 to C1 to be more in line with the zoning of adjacent properties, and appropriate uses at C1 zoning currently exist to the south and east. The comprehensive plan defines this area as single family. However, non-residential zoning does exist on 3 sides of this parcel. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning. The proposed zoning would be consistent with with the surrounding uses and would not, with the surrounding zoning, and would not negatively impact adjacent property. Planning Commission reviewed this request at its meeting in August and voted this 7-3 that the request be forwarded to the City Council with recommendation for approval. This item also came up at the Historic District Commission. I just wanted to briefly discuss that. A member of the public did come forward at the Historic District Commission because within the Historic District Commission standards, it states that review and that the HDC shall review and make recommendations to the Planning Commission on all conditional uses, rezoning, and variances that affect properties within the Historic District. However, this is not consistent with state statute. State statute prohibits the Historic District Commission from considering or taking any actions relative to the internal use of a location. And I can take any questions.
So basically what you're saying with the state law, that it would prohibit the historic district is what I'm hearing, or commission, from having any control or input over what goes on internally in the building. It's just basically the historic outlook. Is that correct?
That is correct. It states that, and I can just read the state statute directly. Sorry, there's a glare on the light. That the Historic District Commission shall not consider interior arrangement or use, and shall take no action under this subchapter except for the purpose of preventing the construction, reconstruction, alteration, restoration, moving, or demolition of buildings, structures, appurtenant fixtures in the historic district, obviously incongruous with the historic aspects of the district. So in our interpretation, that is in state statute that incorporates that a use shall not be considered.
I was at that Planning Commission meeting, and I can't speak for anybody on the Planning Commission meeting, but I think part of the discussion was they felt like that it was going to have to go before the Historic Commission, and then, of course, the council before anything could be done. This particular item was not brought up at the Planning Commission meeting. So I guess in my mind, I feel like that some of those people on the commission voted in favor of something, thinking that there would be another set of eyes, another set of standards to keep certain things from occurring in that facility, but it sounds like now that is not the case.
And I'll just make just a brief correction.
Okay.
Any construction or change to the exterior of the facility, any changes in development, those are things that the Historic District Commission would require to produce a certificate of authorization for. The use of the existing structure is what they would not, the interior use of the existing structure. What is on the table right now is zoning. So the zoning use can be considered by the City Council and the Planning Commission separate because the existing structure does not have to change to switch to that use. Since this is a use conversation, not a development conversation, the Historic District Commission is prohibited from providing that use consideration.
So, Chris, the surrounding property that you've noted on here, which are zoned C1, are really are used more like quiet office. You know, you have an accounting firm, you have some other law offices and some things like that. What are the significant differences between O3 and C1 that I think are causing some of the concerns? Because this is kind of a buffer between what could happen in C1 to some of the residential area. And in full disclosure, I used to live right behind this building.
Sure. So O3 is in our O districts, O1, O2, and O3, they're kind of reversed from our C districts, our commercial districts, which is C1, C2, C3. O3 is actually the least dense or the smallest use within our office space. C1, however, I believe that the highest intensity use could be, for example, a drive-through restaurant. However, that also, any type of development such as that would have to go through the Historic District Commission to get a certificate of authorization for, a certificate of appropriateness, for the construction to be built. So it would go through the Historic District Commission.
Because right now, if I remember right, the building is apartments, isn't it? Or it was the last time.
It's what it looks like from the
I used to know somebody who lived there. So.
Before you go too further, I'm sorry. Did you say C1 allows drive-through restaurants?
It does. I believe that the demolition of that structure would require Historic District Commission approval, and it would also require Historic District Commission approval to develop a new structure at that location.
So would something like going from O3 to O1 allow the developer, the owner, to have a little more density in offices?
O3 to O1. O1 is, for example, a major office building. For example, the regional medical office buildings. That O1 is can be an extremely dense development. O3 transitions from O3, which is very light, which you would find within the community, within the residential portions of the community. Then it steps up to O2, which has slightly more, but usually O1 can have pretty significant office space at those types of locations.
So having office space in there, you'd have to have the appropriate parking and all of the other things that go with it.
That's correct, and it would all have to be approved by the Historic District Commission to meet their guidelines.
Thank you, Mr. Paxson. Anyone else like to speak in favor of this? Brent, were you wanting to speak? I didn't mean to leave you out a while ago. I thought Chris was handling all your speaking for you.
I wish that were the case sometimes. No, so if you were at the Planning Commission meeting, it was, I met with Planning Department. We decided this would be the best route to go. I didn't get any public feedback from anybody. I thought I was walking into everything's going to be fine. That is the opposite of what I walked into. There was a good amount of opposition. Yes, the vote, I guess you could say, went in my favor. But at that meeting, I got in contact with Dan West. He's one of the neighbors that lives behind. I have met with him. He came to my office, we sat down, I started kind of laying out, here's where my head is. This is what we're thinking about doing. I received a letter from him on Friday that said that, their stance as a neighborhood, if you will, has turned from no to give us a better idea of what you're doing and we can maybe get on board. So I guess maybe tabling things might be my my MO tonight. But just wait till we get to the next one.
Are you serious about this?
Yes, I am serious about this one. But I feel like there can be some more communication between me and the neighborhood. I mean, I understand it's a delicate point in the city, and I have a pretty decent idea of what our end goal is. And no, it's not fast food restaurant with a drive-through by any means.
If you were going to get that through the historic commission,
Correct.
I wanted to buy
No.
popcorn and watch.
Yes. No. Yeah. No. It will be. Yeah. No. It will be very appropriate, and he was appreciative of the conversation. And his letter says, if what you show us is in line with the conversation that we have, I feel like we can get on board with what you're doing. At the last meeting, they didn't understand the fact that there's a 20-foot green space requirement along those homes along Center Street. There's 6-foot green space requirements on either edge of the property. So there's some other dynamics to this one. At face value, C1, you can do whatever you want. You can build as high as you want, but there are other governing rules on the piece of property as it relates to the historic district. There's governing rules with massing and scaling. And so yes, in C1, I can build a 8-story building, but with a 2-story and a 2-story, it's got to be cohesive with the neighborhood. So there's some of those checks and balances that I feel like with a little bit more time with the neighbors, I'll be able to show them and, at least get everyone more comfortable than we are today. I would say probably, yeah, well, so I reached out to the architect, but to be able to get something from him that shows what I know that they're wanting to be able to see, I think we'll be hard pressed to have that in 2 weeks. I think it would probably take him about 2 or 3 weeks to produce what they're looking for. So once I receive that, that would give me a week to sit down and meet with them. So, maybe next month sometime.
So maybe the last meeting in October.
You don't have to decide now, just whenever.
Okay, but yes, it does not need to be on the agenda for next meeting, and if we want to, if procedurally, if that's okay, then once I have an opportunity to meet with them, then we can bring it back up.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Brent, I have been in conversation with several of the homeowners, and maybe they just didn't reach out to you previous to the planning commission, but basically the response that I've gotten, and I know at least one that I've talked to is here tonight, I think their stance is it's not the fact that they're opposed to what's going to go there. Their concern is what could go there, and without having a plan with their properties there, what type of effect that would have on them. And in fact, Dan and Margaret both reached out to me today because they both had to be out of town. Dan is in Florida at the hurricane relief efforts and couldn't be here. So I know that's their concern.
Right. That's what he said. It's the uncertainty of it all. And if I can try to shore that up, I think we'll be able to come up with something that works for everybody.
I move that we table this.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. We table this. Now, this is for my knowledge because we don't table a lot of things. Since we're tabling, do we need to let anyone else speak for or against?
It's not, once the matter is pending, which it is, if the council wants to allow public commentary, it can.
I would say some people did show up perhaps, if they'd like to speak.
Yes,
Well,
that's what I was
still.
going to say. I would like to hear from those
Would
individuals.
y'all like to speak?
No, we will talk about this later.
Yes.
Would you please state your name and address for the record, please?
Pam Rollins, 933 Faulkner Street, right next door. I probably have the most invested in this issue. And I want to say thank you for letting me speak. There are 7 properties that share a common boundary with this 931 property. It's a huge property. There are 7 properties that share a common boundary. All of them are residences. Now, there's different zoning codes. One is C1, one is O3, mine. The other 5 are R2A, all residences. The residences do not want a business in their midst. No. Now, the other concern I have is that businesses have different goals and objectives from a historic district. A business is about making money. A business has to be about profitability. It may also be about being a good neighbor and being a partner and so forth and so on. But if they don't make money, they're out of business. A historic district is about preservation and historical significance, charm of the neighborhood, kind of some of those touchy-feely things. A business and a historic district just don't, there's not a mesh, they don't interface. They have different sets of priorities and goals, and they're in opposition to each other. I ask you to vote no on this proposal. Thank you. I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Would anyone else like to speak for or against? Okay, we currently have a motion to table. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the council? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. This item has been tabled. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to rezone property at 203 2nd Street. It currently is zoned R2. The requested zoning is an MF3. This was reviewed at the Planning Commission on August 21st, and at that time, the commission voted 10-0 that the request be forwarded to City Council with a recommendation of approval. We have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance 023. And are we back on 64?
64, yes, sir.
64, thank you.
Mr. Paxton.
Mr. Paxton.
Thank you. The applicant is seeking the rezoning from R2 to MF3 to construct a multi-unit residential structure with garages. The site is currently platted as approximately 0.28 acres. It is anticipated that after the required right-of-way dedication, the remaining developable area will be approximately 0.25 acre. A rezoning to MF3 could accommodate up to 6 dwelling units on the same site, on the site with the acreage identified. The property adjacent to the west across 2nd Avenue is similarly developed. The staff recommendation is a recommendation of approval of the rezoning. The proposed zoning would not likely result in harm to adjacent property once developed. Planning Commission reviewed the request at its regular meeting in August and voted unanimously to forward with a recommendation of approval.
Questions? Mr. Paxton. Take an ordinance, if somebody wants to.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance 02364.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion?
We
I'm
haven't
sorry.
voted.
We
No.
haven't voted.
Come right on.
We haven't
Step on
voted.
up.
Come right on.
And I'm a little bit embarrassed because I was told there was going to be 8 council members. So I only done a handout for 8. But the property.
Just put one right here and we can share this one.
Yeah.
We'll pass it out. We'll pass it out.
Okay.
If you would, please state your name and address for the record, sir.
All right, I'm Junior Parker, and I'm at 205 2nd Street, right beside the property. And what it is, on that paper that's being handed out, I measured, and I got this tape measure, and I measured everything, so I'd make sure I knew what I was talking about when I come in here. So that property he's talking about that's similar, I have not seen it. I have looked everywhere over that neighborhood. I do not know what he's talking about. And I think the commission has a misconception of the property around 203 and 205. if you'll look at the layouts, in yellow, it's got the square footage per, I calculated the square footage per house or per unit on the apartment. Where I have it circled in red is the property at 203. My house is right beside it. All right, I got two circled in orange. They're two brand new constructions, two brand new duplexes, and they're built in accordance to R2. And the reason they built them in accordance to R2 is because they knew they did not qualify for R3 in that area. They're two brand new constructions. And what I've done, I'm going to read this transcript, and so I can make sure I don't miss anything on this. But like I said, well, it would MF3 would devalue my property. That's all it is to it. And what it would do, it would create a circumstance where Mr. Salter could just lowball me on a bid if they went and lowered the value of my property like that. All right. Now that property is 75 by 175, and he wants to put 6 units on it. That's 12 cars on, assuming they're two family, two parents in the family, That'd be 12 cars on a little bitty spot right there. If you'll notice on there, there is nowhere else close around. And the two brand new constructions are in accordance to R2. It's supposed to be a 1 acre minimum, but it is not a 1 acre minimum, which it says in the code that it's supposed to be a minimum of 1 acre. Well, and I called Miss Lauren, and asked her why did they approve it when it was a minimum acre, and she said it's because there would have to have been other existing or MF3 in the near vicinity. And I can tell you, there's not. I've been from Oak Street all the way to 6th Street, from 1st Street all over 3rd Street, and have not cited one MF3 anywhere in that large area. The property is not there. I don't know what he was talking about when he said he knew of an area that was similar. Mr. Salter does not deserve any special benefits that have not been afforded the current adjacent property owners and the 2 recent developers that have built there in less than 100 feet. That property he's talking about, those 2 new duplexes are less than 100 feet away from where he is trying to rezone to MF3. In conclusion, I think some of our city planners have a misconception of the property around 203 and 205 2nd Street. I've spent 9.5 hours talking to over 50 people in the neighborhood, and there is no one in that neighborhood that's anywhere in agreement with having the type of MF3 construction that bunches people together on 1,800 square feet. That's including where they park, where they live, where they walk on the sidewalk. It's actually just inhumane to try and pack someone together like that. All right. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak for or against?
Still Brent Salter. I was going to start off with requesting to table this. I spoke with Junior before this and told him that that's what I was going to do. With meeting with planning department, MF3 was the route that was recommended to go. If you look at the property directly across the street, there are 3 duplexes equaling 6 units on the same footprint. But there was a certain building that we had looked at for this building. When we were dealing with previous staff, it'll be fine to push the buildings up to the road so that it'll be more walkable on the sidewalk, bring all the drives in the back. I got with Beth either in the last week, maybe yesterday, recently, and she confirmed that there's going to be a required 6-foot setback on the front of the lot and a 20-foot green space setback on the back of the lot. And when you take into account those 2 green spaces, the vehicle is not going to be able to turn into the garage in the back. So I need to look at my plan. I need to get back with city planning to see what kind of variances we can get to minimize those green spaces. And so I would like to do that before even if you said yes and I got a piece of property that was MF3 that I wasn't able to use in that capacity, it doesn't do me any good.
So you'd like
So I would like to table.
to
it.
hold this?
Yes.
One quick question. When it says 6 dwelling units, currently, does that mean 3 duplexes? Is that what you're looking at?
No, what we're looking at doing is more of a townhouse style building with garages in the back.
Council, I'll take a motion to table.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to table this item till further notice. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. Brent, do you have anything else tonight you want to table? Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're good. Thank you, sir. No, you're fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Parker.
Mr. Hawkins.
Let's see. I think we have an ordinance to rezone some property at 523 Polk Street. Is that the next one? I believe it is.
That's what I have next.
523
Yep, that's it.
Polk Street. It presently is zoned R2A. The requested zoning is R2. And this was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their meeting on August 21st. And at that time, the commission voted 10-0 that this request be sent to City Council with a recommendation of approval. And we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance 02364. Did we get to 64?
We're still
finally?
on 64.
We're on when I'm 64.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Paxton.
So we only have 3 left. So Mr. Chamber requested to rezone the property located at 505 Polk Street from R2A to R2 with the the applicant is seeking the rezoning from R2A to R2 to construct a duplex on the vacant lot. This rezoning to R2 will conform with lot width standards, as minimum lot width for a duplex in R2A is 100 feet, but R2, the minimum is 50 feet. The current lot width of this parcel is roughly 64 feet. The property is adjacent to R2 property to the west. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning as adjacent structures are of similar use and R2 zoning. The Planning Commission reviewed the request at its regular meeting in August and voted unanimously to forward with a recommendation of approval.
Make a motion for adoption of the ordinance, but open to comment if needed.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Isby. I like the way you did
I
that.
did like that.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance unless someone would like to speak for or against before we vote. Mr. Garrett. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I've said this before, and I promise this will be the last time I ever say this. Years ago, my recollection is R2A was created to keep smaller lots from having duplexes put on them, so they're crammed in there together. All right. Over time, and I know things change, and I'm good. Like I said this last time I'll bring this up. Over time, we've allowed more and more of it to happen. All right. But the reality of it is, in this particular neighborhood where I grew up, I grew up in this neighborhood. The reality of it is, no one's going to build single-family homes in this neighborhood anymore. They're going to build duplexes. So, given that that's where it's going and where it's continuing to go, and, we might as well allow someone. It's always a balance between building something, getting something built that's better versus not. And so, I will vote for this, and I'll live with it.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. No, please bring that up anytime in the future when it needs to be brought up. Absolutely. Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Mel.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter.
Yes.
Ms. Tucker.
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins.
Yes.
Ms. Isby.
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to rezone property at 2730 Allison Lane. It currently is zoned O2. The requested zoning is an O1, which is in my brain, Mr. Paxton.
We skipped 505.
I'm sorry. Pardon me.
That's okay, Mr. Hawkins. We're going back to twice every other 2 weeks.
You want to do ordinance number 64 again, don't you?
Yeah, I wanted to do 64 one more time. Okay, there's one at 505 Polk Street to rezone property from R2A to R2. And we have an ordinance read for this one, but it's not 064, it's 065.
Moved on.
Mr. Paxton.
Thank you. The applicant is seeking the rezoning from R2A to R2 to construct duplex on the vacant lot. This rezoning to R2 will conform to the lot standards. Is this the same one that we just did?
No,
There's
there's two.
Okay, so they just look alike. Okay. This one's 64 feet, the other one's 67 feet. There we go. This rezoning to R2 rezoning to R2 will conform with lot width standards, as minimum lot width for a duplex with R2A is 100 feet, but in R2 is 50 feet. The current lot width of this parcel is roughly 64 feet. The property is adjacent to R2, property to the west. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning adjacent structures of similar use in R2 zoning, and this was forwarded from Planning Commission with a unanimous recommendation of approval.
I'll make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance 02365, but open to public comment.
Hey, council, we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. No comment from public. Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, this time really is 2730 Allison Lane. It's a rezoning request from 02 to 01, and what in the world somebody wanting to do that for?
The applicant is seeking the rezone from 02 to 01 for the construction of a parking lot to provide additional parking for Pediatrics Plus. A parking lot as a principal use is not allowed in 02, but is allowed by right in 01. There is a need for additional parking in this area as cars currently park on the street, causing safety issues for individuals and vehicles. Also state that it causes a longer walk time from where the people have to park to where they get into the facility. Staff recommend approval of this rezoning as it is an appropriate use for the area, and the comprehensive plan defines this area as office. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at its regular meeting in August and voted unanimously to forward with a recommendation of approval.
Any questions for Mr. Paxton?
Make a motion for adoption of this ordinance in the emergency clause.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Is there an emergency clause in this one? I'm sorry, Mr. Hawkins.
Probably not an emergency.
No.
No emergency clause.
Okay, all right.
Like I said, no emergency.
And there was no comment from the public? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Come on. You can wait, might as well. Be heard.
Wait through 111
Yes,
pages.
David Tapp, 1000 Southwest Energy Drive, Suite 101. Pediatrics Plus, co-owner Pediatrics Plus. It's kind of ironic that I'm back 10 years later and we just talked about 575 Club Lane. It's very interesting that I started at the playground and here we are again. And so we're talking about this parking lot, all kind of ties together. The reason why we had 575 Club Lane is we did an expansion at Pediatrics Plus. And so we did Club Lane in, I think, 2013 or 14, whenever that was. We expand on Pediatrics Plus, and we built this nice parking lot in the back, and we're going to hopefully get off of Lumac and Allison Lane. But if you ever drive by our location on College, we still have cars parked. And so there's a beautiful vacant lot right there beside Pediatrics Plus. And finally, I'm like, all right, we got to do something and buy this land. And when I almost bought it, I realized that we couldn't just build a parking lot on it. On the O2, you can't do that. And so I got with the city and they're like, no, you have to rezone O1. And so our plan is to build a 56 parking spaces on this lot and have our employees and staff be able to park there. One thing that we do that we're thankful for the city of Conway and UCA is we have a lot of students come in for observation hours. We get a lot of therapists from all over the nation to come to our facility and do their clinicals as well. So this provides more parking for staff and families that we serve here in Conway. So I'm definitely for this zoning, so I can build a parking lot for the staff.
You had a reason. First time you've been back since then?
Yeah, it's so weird. It's been like 9 years. and then
You avoiding us, huh?
Well, I haven't had
I
anything
will.
else to do. I mean, but yeah, it's very ironic. So that's why I want to speak, is the ironic of all this. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will say, I work right in that same area, and I mean, normally when you drive down there, there are cars parked on both sides, so people trying to navigate in and out, it will definitely help with that, to have a parking area for those cars.
Thank you, Ms. Isbell. Hey, council, back to you.
Make a motion for.
We've got no
Oh.
further comment. Mr. Garrett.
Oh,
Mr. Hawkins?
sorry.
Yes.
My bad, Sheila.
Yes. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins, your last time at bat tonight.
That was ordinance 66, by the way. And this is going to be ordinance 67, and it's the rezoning of property, or requested rezoning of property at 450 Corporate Drive from I-3 and a PUD to S1. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their meeting on August the 21st of 2023. And at that time, the commission voted 10-0 to send this to City Council with the recommendation of approval. Mr. Paxton, for the last time.
For the last time this evening, and thank you for the council. This will be my last time presenting to you, and I appreciate you all
I
working
just
with
asked
us.
them until last day, man.
My last day will be on the 19th, but this
You
will be my
not
last
got
day.
gonna give us a 2-3 month grace period in there?
I'd try. Benefits don't work that way, though. We gotta work with the benefits that we give them. So.
We're gonna miss you.
We
Yes,
are.
we
We
are.
absolutely
Yeah.
are.
We just been bragging on you, now you leaving us, man. I'm telling you. You done a great job.
Thank you.
You have, Chris.
I think I did half the job tonight.
I'm saving it all for
We'll
the
just
very end.
going out with a bang.
So the applicant on this item is seeking a rezoning from I-3 and PUD to S1 to accommodate a more appropriate community center space zoning. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning as the rezoning would likely not result in harm to adjacent property and would likely complement the surrounding neighborhoods, being a civic space. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at its regular meeting on August 21st, 2023, and voted unanimously to request the item to be forwarded to the City Council with a recommendation of approval. And we have Mr. Peterson available to speak on this item.
Seen your face a lot lately.
Hi, my name is Brad Peterson with Crafton Toll, 10825 Financial Center Parkway in Little Rock. I am happy to answer any questions about the site or the use of the planned use of the property.
I think this group pretty well knows what the use is. Would anyone like to speak against or for or against? Okay, council, back to you.
Make a motion for the adoption of ordinance number
67.
67, yes.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to rezone the property at 450 Corporate Drive, S1. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Passes 7-0. All right, council, you got your pens and paper out. I need a drum roll. September 26th, 4:30 p.m. before the 6 o'clock council meeting, we will break ground on the community center.
Hey, is that in stone?
That's in stone.
We're not gonna table that, are we?
Nope.
Okay.
No, if we table that, we're going to table Felicia and Jamie and Shawana and Troy. September 26th at 4:30, we will have groundbreaking. The only thing that would change that would be the weather, but equipment will be moving in shortly thereafter. So it's been a long process, and a lot of folks have put a lot of hours into this, both public and private, and we appreciate everything that has taken place.
I don't need swimming lessons, it's been so long.
You can take them with me.
Next up, we have public safety. First, we have an ordinance appropriating donations fund for Conway Fire Department, Chief Winter.
Good evening, council. We're asking acceptance of $2,250 from Walmart to purchase a new smart board for our training room.
Make a motion for the adoption of ordinance 02368.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? This is a smart board. You need Ledbetter me to come over and set it up?
Please, please.
Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Passes 7-0. Next is an ordinance appropriating insurance proceeds for the Conway Fire Department. Chief?
Yes, we're asking acceptance of $7,136 insurance money to help repair one of our units.
Adoption of ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And
Sorry
Chief,
you had to sit here
always-
so long.
Hey, Chief Winter?
You always get booted to the end of the agenda. Don't you have more strife with the mayor to get further out?
Thank you.
I was always last. He can suck it up and take it.
I just wanted to compliment your force, because I got to see firefighters and some Pafford EMTs in action. And
You had an accident or something?
no, I did not, and I'm not going to talk about where or why, but they were professional and they were helpful and it was great.
Well, good.
So
I'm sorry you had to witness that, but I'm glad it was.
wasn't from my favorite fire station, but they were okay.
Y'all do a good job, Chief. You really do. And finally, the last item is tonight, as you know, former Mayor David Kinley, who retired after 12 years of service, passed away. State law, when Mayor Kinley retired, he drew 50% of his mayor's salary until his death, at which time state law allows the city council to vote to allow his widow, Miss Sandy Kinley, who attended everything that went on in the city with him, to draw 25% of that 50%. And I would like to ask the council to do that. It is open for discussion.
25% of the
50%, yeah. So he drew 50%. State law. She'll get 25 of that 50%.
Of the 100. Okay.
That's not the way I understood it.
25% of the 50 that he drew is not very much. That's a quarter of it.
Okay. Straighten me out.
It should be the 50% that he received.
Really?
That we will research that and get that right.
I was fixing to say, because I would think that she would get a quarter of his annual salary.
Like half of what he was
Right,
getting.
half of what he was
Not a quarter. Either way, I move to approve.
getting.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second to approve this, and we will get the correct answer on it. Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0. That's the way Mr. Finkenbeiner and I, he read through it. That was understanding. We will reach out to the municipal league tomorrow and get a correct answer on that. I do see your point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and keep in mind that elected officials like you and Mr. Garrett and Mr. Finkenbeiner don't participate in our city's pension funds.
Right.
So this is totally separate from all of that.
Miss Sandy was always, every time you looked up, saw Mayor Kinley, she was right there with him, handing out turkeys and everything else. So she's well deserving. That's all we have, council. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.